Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Daily Adler podcast, where we interview Adlerians about their work and their personal backgrounds. Today, we're talking with Dr. William L. Camp, also known as Bill Camp. He's an author, professor, and psychologist in the beautiful state of Wisconsin. We're so excited to talk with him today. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Thank you, Shay. I'll tell you a little about who I am. Those who probably don't know, and that's most of you. I'm 88 years old, born May 10, 1938. I'm adopted. My name was Donald Thomas before it was Bill Camp. I, uh, I'm still practicing a bit. I'm half-time or a little less. I'm kind of moving towards shutting down my practice. I'm in Marinette, Wisconsin now. Lived here for a while. I done a lot of things in my life. I was a university professor. I worked with as a consultant to a lot of clinics, and I've done writing. I've done a lot of different kinds of things. I've retired 3 times and didn't like it any time I retired. So the next day I was doing something else. I need to stay busy, do what I like to do, and I like to work with people. That's to me very important. And my goal in life, I guess, is to be of some value to other human beings. That's what I've always said, and that's what I think and believe.
That's beautiful.
Now, we're
What
talking today about Adlerian psychology and particularly Rudolf Dreikurs. You want to ask a question? I'll wait. Go ahead.
You just asked it for me. I wanted to know what brought you into Adlerian psychology.
Say again?
I wanted to know what brought you into Adlerian psychology. You were
Well,
about to
the
answer
question,
it.
I was a student, an undergraduate student, and I really wanted to be an architect.
Hmm.
Frank Lloyd Wright appealed to me. I was wanting to be an architect and thought maybe I could, but there was no architectural school in Wisconsin. The out-of-state tuition was prohibitive. It just was too much. And so I thought about what I'd like to have as a second choice. And I was working with people a little bit. I graduated early from university, and so I was teaching a little bit at Platteville High School as a substitute teacher and as a counselor. Very little training for counseling. I had a couple of courses, took one graduate course while I was doing that work. That's very different in those days. And I thought, this is really interesting work. I think I might like to spend more time, maybe even my life doing this. And I did. I shifted gears. I went from an interest in architecture to an interest in psychology. And I went to Madison, University of Wisconsin-Madison, where I worked with Dr. John Rothney. I worked at his laboratory for superior students, research and guidance laboratory for superior students. I did my master's degree with him. My first publication was with him. We had a thesis. It was a thick thing, maybe not so thick, I don't know, inch maybe, a lot of words. And I said, I'd like to try to see if we can publish that. He said, oh, you do want to publish something? Well, he said, boil it down. I boiled it down, boil it down, boil it down, boil it down. And he kept saying, it's too long, got to be shorter, more concise. We got to a point where he was satisfied. He added his name, and it was Camp and Rothney, and we published it. I was pretty excited. That was a lot of fun. Uh, I can tell a lot of stories. I've written 10 books. My 10th book has this story in it, but I'll tell you this story. It may interest you a little bit, and we'll get into the important parts. But while I was at Madison, I was having my birthday party. Huh, wasn't a birthday party. I was all alone studying social psychology in my office at the laboratory right next to University apartments. And upstairs was a couple I'd gotten to know quite well, girl from Tenafly, New Jersey, and a guy who eventually married her. He was an electrical engineering student. She was a graduate student, a first-year student in English literature. And they were having a party on this afternoon, and I was down in my office feeling a little lonely, I guess, and thinking, well, nobody knows it's my birthday. Nobody cares. I might as well study social psychology. And I did that. And they looked down. They saw my office light on. They called me. They said, Bill, you're in your office. I said, yes, yes. Do you want to go out for a steak sandwich? And I said, oh, a steak sandwich. Well, a steak sandwich in those days was a big piece of white roll with a little piece of shaved ham on it. We called it a steak sandwich. And you get half a Coke, Coca-Cola divided into two little glasses. You'd have one glass, 35 cents. Then it went up to 39 cents. Well, I looked and I counted the pennies and the nickels and the dime in my pocket. And I said, I think I can do it. Yes, I can do it. I'll come over. Well, I came over. They were having a party. I didn't know it. A few of the people there were people I knew, other people were people I did not know. And she said, well, this guy coming is Bill Camp, and it's his birthday today. Let's pretend it's his birthday party. And so I knocked on the door, and they opened the door. Happy birthday, they sang Bill Camp. Oh, I thought, wow, a surprise party. I've never had such a party. It wasn't for me. I didn't know it, but that was just what they did. Well, long story short, everybody left except one little, I have to get rid of that, I guess. Something here, let's see, get rid of that. A skinny little girl, looked like a seventh grader, still there. And Julie Stark, my friend, I said, Bill, walk her home. Oh, I said, I don't walk her home. I said, she's just a little kid. No, she's a master's degree student. She's a friend of mine. Well, I walked her home. And she was an English literature student, and she was talking with me. And I said, well, what are you interested in? Oh, I'm writing a novel, she said. A novel? I said, thinking very cynically. I thought, every English literature student, graduate student I've ever met is writing a novel. None are ever published. That's what I thought. Okay. Well, tell me about the novel. She told me about it. Told me one of her professors, she said, were very stuffy old men at Madison, didn't like them, didn't care about them. One took an interest in her, and so she was writing the novel and she wrote it. Well, I wanted to tell her about my little article, 4 pages, in an obscure journal no one's heard of, probably. And I finally worked her around and said, well, I'm trying to be a writer too. I said, I'm having something published, thinking that she would never have hers published. Well, long story short, I walked her home. Got to know her. Her name is Joyce Carol Oates. Joyce Carol Oates, you know who that is? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I've got a lot of her books here. She's written, I think, 48 books and screenplays and all kinds of things. I remember when Time magazine came out with an article saying that if she was not the finest female author in the Occident, in the West, she was certainly one of them. Well, she wasn't. She still is living. And she was born in 1938, just as I was. She's retired now. She taught at Princeton, a full professor there for years and years, teaches occasionally still at UCLA. She was married twice, once to an educational psychologist, by the way. But anyway, I got to know her, and never would have dreamed that the skinny little girl still looks about the same, except her hair is gray now. But she has done quite well with her life writing.
Yes.
A little story. I was at Madison, and a long story short, I finally graduated with a Ph.D. after I got out and did other things. Wrote a book about that. My 10th book is The Informal Education. No, it's The Informal Training Education of a Psychologist. Hi, Ben.
Hey, how's it going? Sorry to pop in here, guys.
Sure, no worries.
I'm going to get that. I'll get a copy of that to Ben pretty soon. It's essentially being edited.
Yeah, we're recording this, Ben. So go ahead.
Well, anyway, we're just talking
to be here
a little bit, getting acquainted. Well, anyway, long story, very long story short, that book covers all the interim activities, maybe a lot of them, some of them. I wind up at Platteville. It's 1970, this summer. I'm 32 years old now. I have my PhD a few years, and I'm teaching. I'm an associate professor of psychology. The chairman of the department is a fellow, good friend of mine, Don Berger, Berger. Don got his doctoral degree from the University of Oregon, where he met, I believe he met, Dr. Dreikurs.
Okay, there's the connection.
There's
All
a connection
right.
now. And he, as chairman, had invited Dr. Dreikurs to come and offer 2 one-credit course seminars at our university that summer, and another psychiatrist, another MD, Joseph Wolpe, systematic
Oh,
desensitization, all of that. They both
nice.
came. I got to know them both. We sat in Don Berger's living room. We talked. I learned. I took notes, and it was quite interesting and exciting. That summer, I taught 2 courses. I taught child psychology and adolescent psychology, and we made them. We I started at 6. One was at 6, one was at 7 o'clock in the morning. They had never done that before, but students agreed that that could happen. And so they took my courses, and I could then enroll and be a student in Dr. Dreikurs and Dr. Wolpe's courses. Very interesting.
Well, Bill, what was Dreikurs like? What kind of personality did
Well,
he exude for
he
you?
was, I first met Dr. Dreikurs in Don Berger's backyard.
Uh-huh.
We talked there. And then we talked in his living room and other places. We took those 2 men, by the way, and Dr. Dreikurs' wife and Dr. Volpe's 2 associates, 2 Ph.D. psychologists who presented with him on the Mississippi River, where they had an interesting time on a pontoon boat. They were a little reluctant to go, but we said we'd go slowly, we'd go along the shore, and they seemed to enjoy it and said they did afterward. Well, anyway, what kind of a guy was Dreikurs? I talked with him. I remember him. I remember the bow tie. I
Mm.
remember the mustache. And when I
Mhm.
met him, the first thing I got off on the wrong foot with Dr. Dreikurs. I said, Dr. Dreikurs, I said, you were, I think I said something to the effect that he was a student of Dr. Adler. Oh, he just looked at me and he pointed his finger, young man. He said, that is incorrect or something of the sort. He said, we were contemporaries. Oh my,
Ah.
so sorry. Well, because of Dr. Dreikurs working to, refine and develop some of the ideas from Dr. Adler, I had made that statement as a young man, and that was the wrong thing to say. Well, after a
Mm.
while, we got to know each other a bit, and we laughed, and he laughed about it, and he kind of, I guess, forgave me for that. Don Berger and I had written an article for a journal. That might have been a journal anyway. Uh, Professional journal on early recollections. Well, Dr. Dreikurs saw that and he said, who wrote that article? Well, Berger said, and Bill Camp here. Well, oh, yeah, maybe he's not all bad, he may have thought. And we talked, and he was an interesting man and he had a lot to share.
Mm.
And so did Dr. Wolpe.
Mm.
They didn't debate, but they had interesting conversations in Don Berger's living room, mostly in his living room.
Mm.
And sometimes we'd go out to dinner in the evening, and we would we'd either be in their hotel rooms or they're just out for dinner, and we'd talk. And I'd keep my mouth closed, and that's hard for me sometimes. I listened and I made notes,
Mm.
and I learned.
Mm.
And he told us about all kinds of things. He told us about Eva, talked to his daughter, who had
Mhm.
taught for many years, 50 years, at Southern Illinois University. Talked about Eric on the West
Mhm.
Coast
Mm.
being interested in the law and the application of psychology to the law and so on.
Mhm.
He talked about his early years. He talked about being in the Army. He talked about going to medical school.
Mm.
He talked about a lot of interesting things, very interesting to me, things I didn't know about, but I learned about. And he answered our questions, and it was quite an interesting fellow. He was a nice man.
Mm.
Uh, First time I ever encountered him was in the men's room when he was right before one of his lectures. And of course, I knew who he was. And I just said hello, and he said hello, walked out, and later I made my mistake, and then we got to be better acquainted, and he seemed to be very supportive of the idea
Mhm.
that he talked about how he had taken Alfred Adler's ideas and tried to refine them and
Mhm.
focus them and make them more applicable to treatment, psychotherapy, work
Mm-hmm.
with patients. I call them patients. Some people call them clients, but we call them patients where I work. And anyway,
Wow, that's a neat story. That's a terrific story.
well, that's
Yeah.
anyway. That's kind of, and we knew him and worked with him, and he said to us, he said, "Now, if I had your youth, to several of us, university teachers, professors, in Don Berger's living room, he said, I would write another book or books." He said, I'm reaching the end of my life. He talked about being briefly on the stage of life and then
Mm.
move on, and someone else moves onto the stage of life. That's the way he described it. And he said, we need other people to come along and to do the same thing with our work, his work,
Mhm.
our work that we had tried to do with Dr. Adler's work. And
Ah.
so I thought, well, maybe I could be part of that.
Mhm.
And I made notes and so on. And that is what generated the 5 books. I've written 10, but 5 on Adlerian psychology,
Mhm.
which Ben has looked at, and which I guess prompts Ben to have a little interest in Bill Camp, maybe, although he and I have been friends, or
Yeah.
acquainted at least, for
Mhm.
probably 10 years.
He referred to you as a treasure for the state of Wisconsin.
Yes. Now,
Really admires your work.
I'm sorry?
He really admires your work.
Well,
Ben does.
I'm glad he does. And I
Mhm.
admire Dr. Dreikurs' work, and it's
Mhm.
Dr. Dreikurs and Adler's work.
Mhm.
I wrote a lot of it. There are so many books. At the end of each of those books, there's a list, a long list of things written by Adler, by Dreikurs. I've read and studied some, not all, most of them, tried to. Got information from that. When Dr. Dreikurs did his work at Plantville, he had 1 week for one course and then another week for another course, kind of almost
Mhm.
all day. And and he was invited to appear on television in Dubuque, Iowa, and on
Mhm.
radio and so on. And in some sessions, we were allowed to record a bit. And some of those recordings were of quality that was good enough to transcribe. And he allowed us to transcribe some of that
Mhm.
with the idea that some of it might be refined and possibly shared with others, even published at some later time. Bits of it, bits and pieces. And in
Mhm.
one of the books, Adlerian Counseling Theory and Practice, we quote, and also in the book on Dreikurs himself,
Mhm.
Dr. Dreikurs himself, we quote some of what he said with his permission and
Mhm.
obscuring the names of the patients involved. With his help, he suggested how we might edit it and how we might include some. If we ever wrote one, something, a book, we thought a book was more than that. But he died, of course, in 1972. But I think he thought, well, Camp Kid he might write a page or two. And I don't know. He thought I knew I was serious. I think he knew I was serious too, but he
Mhm.
probably wondered if I would ever, you know, do it or try to do it. And of course,
And you did.
I
I
did
mean, you
my best.
wrote 10 books.
Well, but only 5 are on Adlerian psychology.
Oh, okay.
Well, the last one has someone Dreikurs in it, though. I must report that.
Okay.
He was a very impressive man, I think, just a good man, an interesting man. And the idea that he and Volpe, 2 world-class
Mhm.
psychiatrists, would sit together and they didn't debate, as I told Ben when I talked with him this morning. They didn't debate, they discussed. And the
Mhm.
discussions were I thought if I
It
went
was
over
a,
tape
those are
recorded,
amazing, I'll bet.
well, it was just so, if we had tape recorders there and could have recorded that, it would have been wonderful. Didn't have that, but I did take notes. I scribbled and I kind of tried to read what I wrote all those 50 more years ago. But he was a nice man. He was a good man. He was a
Mhm.
very bright man. He was a very incisive man. I talked with Ben about something when we talked a little this morning. Ben was wondering if I'm still among the living and going to be able to do this. And I said, yes, I'm still here, Ben. And we talked, and I said something to him. He said, you should mention this, I think. I told him how during the discussions between Dr. Dreikurs and Dr. Volpe, Dr. Dreikurs made the point. He said that I really like what Dr. Volpe is doing. And he said, I like it for a number of reasons, but particularly, he said, because it's measurable, quantifiable.
Interesting.
And I think that's so important because in our work, we need to try to measure if we're going to really try to uh, interest people in the way we conduct our work with other human beings. Well, I'm just talking on and on. I could talk for hours, but if you have a question, I'll try to answer.
Yeah, go ahead, Shay.
One of the things that we like to talk about with our guests is an early positive recollection that they would
Early
like to share.
recollections.
Yeah, that maybe share something about who they.
Well, I've written a lot about early recollections.
Can you give us one of your own?
Give us one of yours.
One of mine. Oh, my.
Okay.
Well, you're going to assess me. Let's see. Early recollections.
No. We're not going to assess you. We'll let you assess yourself.
I will. I have. What do I dare report?
Yeah.
Now I'll try to be open about this and early recollections. I remember walking down the street when I could just barely walk. I was a newly adopted little boy, and there's a picture of me, and it's probably the picture I remember. Walking down the street, and I'm pulling a string, and on the end of that string is a duck with wheels, and the duck is kind of quacking and moving because the wheels are making it move. And I'm smiling, and my father is kneeling down with his Kodak camera taking a picture of me. And my mother is taking a picture of my father taking a picture of me. I remember that. Early recollection, early memory.
And what do you make of that?
Something about control, I think. The idea I was controlling that duck, and I was in the limelight, and somehow I'm not sure I want to say it that way, but that's probably what I would begin to say if I were talking to someone else and this was their recollection.
Because you were kind of controlling your parents a little too, if they were both immersed in the moment, focused on what was going on with you.
Well, they were. I'm English Welsh, adopted. I'm May 10, 1938 is my birthday. I have a sister, a very bright sister who's an artist. She's retired, art teacher. Willadine Louise Camp Yankee is her married name. And she lives in Muscatine, Iowa. They tested her IQ. I remember it was quite high in the 150s. But anyway, and I was a little impressed by that, maybe jealous of it. But I'm English Welsh, she's Czechoslovakian. I met my birth mother. I don't know about my birth father. She would never tell me. She's passed away now. My adoptive parents said, Bill, you're going to be married. I was married to my best friend, Millie Kavanaugh, mother of our two wonderful children. We have a son, John, electrical engineer, and a daughter, Christine, who's just completed a job as vice president for North America for an international company, and now she's working, slowing down a little bit as she grows a little older, and working as vice president for a national company in the United States. Anyway, the new improved versions of Millie and me, hands down, hands down. If you met John, the guy that helped me get this thing on, you would probably say, well, it's enough, Bill. Let's get John on now. He's interesting, but they're the new improved versions, hands down. And we have 5 grandchildren. 5 grandchildren. But
Bill,
go ahead.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Please.
Now, you talked about how smart your sister is and how you were impressed by that. How did you kind of, now that you're older, looking back at your childhood, how did you kind of see the birth order happening between the two of you? Did it seem typical? Did it seem like a psychological birth order? What was it?
Well, I was the firstborn, even though I was adopted. I understand. I've written a whole chapter on that. One of my books. I understand. I was pretty ambitious, I think, and that maybe fits. And my sister could have done all kinds of things with her life and decided to be an artist, which was fine. I have some of her pictures here and there, and she's more of an athlete. I think she was in high school, she was a lifeguard, and she would every summer do the RAGBRAI across Iowa with her bicycle and then take her bicycle on an airplane, another bicycle, a mountain bike out to the mountains out the west. And oh, she traveled all over the world. Pichu, she was there. She loves her favorite city in the world, she said, is Rome, Italy. We've been there, but she's been there more than once. She loves to travel. And were we in any competition? Well, I don't know that I felt I was, may have been, but she was. We'd have lunch at noon. My father was a high school teacher. He'd come home half a block. We'd have lunch at noon together. And she would say, well, why can't I do that? Bill can do it. I was 2 years older. It's because he's a boy.
Oh.
And that's why, well, no, but that was part of the reason, I think, with my parents, possibly. But we still talk. Willadine and I talk. We have a good relationship, and we were lucky. I always say, lucky me. Lucky me to have been adopted. Oh my! If I had lived in the dormant, well, if I'd continued to live in the on the south side of Chicago in an orphanage, I would think, possibly dead or in prison. That's how it worked out for people who were not taken. I know. I've looked, I've checked. But I was adopted into a fine family, a good Christian family. Lucky me, lucky us to have been adopted. Got a new name. Donald Thomas? No. William Lyman Camp Jr. The third, actually. William the third. Anyway. And then I say, lucky me to have met a wonderful woman who cared about me and someone I could love and still do love. She passed away 8 years ago, and my best friend, and we were married. Lucky us. We would say, lucky us. And we would say, lucky us to have two wonderful children, the new improved versions of us. Lucky us. And lucky us to have 5 wonderful grandchildren. They really are the new improved version of us. Austin, age 17, I talked with him last night. I gave him my motorcycle. And I'm not sure I should have done it. His mother wasn't quite so sure either, but he rebuilt it. He's 17 years old. I mean, my gosh, I couldn't do that. The new improved version of maybe all of us, are these 5 grandchildren. They're just remarkable young people. I'm a grandfather.
So you're kind of doing what Dreikurs said. You're kind of making a slow exit off the stage, and your family is making a more of an entrance to the stage. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think that's right. I think that's right. It'd be interesting to see. We have a couple of them who are straight A students. A chemistry student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and the other one is still in high school. Speaks 2 languages. John, our son, married a girl, Ivona, from Warsaw, near Warsaw, Poland. We've been there. And their parents were here for the wedding and all the rest. And those 2 kids speak fluent Polish. I mean, they spoke Polish in their home and they spoke English in their home. And one of them speaks, they say, accent-free. In Poland, they wouldn't know she had an American accent. Wow. Me, at Christmas time, I've got a little card, and I've got it with all the, I bring out my little card, and I try to say Merry Christmas. So I'm outclassed big time. But it's interesting. And then they've learned third language, Spanish. They think they had to learn Spanish. They had a girl, an exchange student, came for 1 year and lived with them from Barcelona, Spain. And of course, they were studying Spanish in high school anyway. And so they learned a lot more Spanish from her. She's like a member of the family in a sense. Well, anyway, I'm just telling you a little about the family. I don't know. We wanted to talk more about Adlerian psychology.
Yeah. Shay's got another question for you.
We love to hear how you would, if you could talk to Adler today, what question you would ask him or what you would say to him.
Well, Adler, I don't know. I've never met Adler. I don't know. But I would probably ask him how he separated so significantly from Sigmund Freud. And moved in an entirely different direction. Jung did the same. And when Adler died, as you may know, Freud and Dreikurs. What was Dr. Dreikurs? When Dr. Dreikurs died, he said, "Oh, he just kind of, well, that's those people over there will have strange ideas." Freud was somewhat disparaging of those ideas, and they're very different ideas. I've written about some of that in one of my books. How, but I'm interested. I would be interested in learning more about how they split so significantly from the Freudian idea, and there was competition there. I mean, there was. Dr. Dreikurs talked a little about that. I've never talked with Dr. Adler, I don't know, but I would be interested in how that all worked and how they would bring it together into kind of a unified theory. In physics, looking for a unified theory, Einstein, our uncle, I'm adopted. My father's oldest brother worked with Einstein. He was a theoretical mathematician. Okay. He talked about Einstein, and he talked about Einstein padding around in his slippers and, and going out sailing up and down and all the rest
Well,
of it.
didn't Einstein praise Adler at one point? Didn't he send something to Adler,
I don't
Einstein?
know the answer to that. That may be
I
true.
think he did, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, I have not encountered that, but it may be true. But
Mhm.
I think that the ideas were different. I would ask Dr. Adler how that split came about and how it became so significant and how if they ever attempted to kind of reconcile it, maybe paper it over in a sense into a unified theory, which was what Einstein was looking for in physics. I think that, and I can see how we could do that. If I lived long enough, I think, I mean, you can too. I can see how they fit together. I do. I mean, of course, many years after the fact and studying both lives and so on, I can see that there are ways to link it. And I'm sure those men were way ahead of anything I ever thought of in that regard, but I would ask him a question like that, probably.
There are a lot of similarities between Freud and Adler, which is why I think initially they got like they did. Society, their psychology society. It
They
seems though
connected, but
Freud,
then they
ironically
didn't.
enough, and then they didn't exactly. But Freud had a history of doing that with people that he would work with. If you didn't agree with Freud, there would eventually come a point where you either agreed or you were anathema, basically. He would cut
That's
you
right.
off.
You aren't
And so
invited to his anymore. That's right. I agree.
Yeah.
We could talk about that for hours. Dr. Dreikurs, of course, I didn't know well. I knew him well enough. I think got to know him well enough. We talked and he went from calling me Camp to Bill, which maybe suggested that I was at least worthy of a little attention. I don't know. And Bill, and that was nice. I felt good about that. Bill, I'm Bill. Um, but he talked about a lot of his ideas and some of the notes. Again, sometime we may want to look at those notes. I talked to
Yes.
Ben. I said to Ben, maybe I could pull some of those notes together, and I've tried to do it into a little something, and we could maybe put it in the journal.
That would be nice.
A journal. And Ben said, sure. And I said, Ben, take it, and if it's worthless, just put it in the circular file. And if you can rewrite it a little, that's fine. Or if you need to have me rewrite it, or if there's something there that's worthy of a little space in that journal, there might be people who would be interested to see what some young man, I wasn't a kid, wrote those many years ago in Platteville, Wisconsin, just sitting and listening in awe.
Hey, Dr. Camp, I found the quote from Einstein. Let me put it up, see if you can see it here. It says Adler received a letter from Einstein, who had attended one or more of Adler's lectures. The letter stated that Einstein considered Adler's individual psychology to be the most scientific and closest to the truth today. And that's found in that short book says Alfred Adler as we remember him. So I thought so. That's really
I think you're
interesting.
right. I kind of recall.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So what was your connection to Adler? I mean to Einstein, excuse me. What was your connection to Einstein again? Was it
Einstein. Oh,
yeah, was it
my
a
father's oldest brother worked with him. He was a
that's what it
theoretical
was.
mathematician, worked with him. He
Yes.
talked about Einstein, and Einstein's IQ was about 160, they estimate, probably.
Oh, yeah.
I've written about, read my last book.
Okay.
There's a guy that worked for Herr Hitler,
Mhm.
Heinz and Enza. They both had PhDs. They're both from Germany. Heinz was responsible directly, and this is hard to believe maybe, to the head of the Luftwaffe.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you one little quick story. It's an interesting one, I think. We would see them every summer. We were out one summer and our boat had a 125 horsepower engine, a Johnson, and it quit. Our children were just little kids at that time. It quit, and along comes this. They called it was a pontoon boat. They called it a float boat. Two gray-haired people. Ahoy, he said with his German accent. Are you having trouble? I said, yes, sir, I am. I cannot start this engine. Well, he tried to help me, couldn't do it, towed me in. And after that, we were friends. We got to know Heinz and Enza quite well. They lived in the wintertime, they were in Australia, not
Hmm.
Austria, Australia. And in the summertime, they lived in Falls Church, just out of Washington, D.C.
Oh.
Well, they'd come in the summer to this cottage. And as he'd been found, he was a guest of the United States. He said he was really a war prisoner.
Mhm.
And, he had escaped, left his family, wife and children would not leave him. He was divorced, went to Australia, eventually met another younger woman. She'd been a professor of language at the universities in Europe, and they were married, and that was Enza.
Hmm.
Brilliant young people, one of the brightest minds I've ever met. My uncle
Mhm.
maybe was one. Uh, Heinz was another, and the other one was a good friend of my wife, uh, Ed Stone. Look up Ed Stone. He's physics,
Hmm. Hmm.
University of Chicago. He's an interesting guy. We knew him from our unions and got to know him well. Those are the three best minds I think I've ever encountered, brightest
Mhm.
maybe. But anyway, I meet Heinz and we know him and we do things with him and all kinds of things and have a good time. And one time we were at their house. I'll make this story short if I can. Uh, we're in their pontoon boat, their float boat. We're going down through the channel, 28 lakes, largest inland chain of freshwater lakes in the world, northern Wisconsin, believe it or not. That's how they advertise it. We're going down, Enza's at the tiller, and she turns out the lights so we can see the stars. Beautiful evening, better.
Hmm.
Police boat was hiding there.
Uh-oh.
Well, to make a long story short, cost us, I think, $29, I think, finally. And we paid it. And yeah, so later she used to tell the story of, oh, yeah, Bill and Billy were arrested with us. We know them well. She had a little sense of humor.
Yeah.
Didn't she tell the story? But anyway, they were in Australia one winter. We were out and we took pictures of their cottage in the winter. They'd never been there in the winter. I took 2 rolls of 12 pictures back when we had rolls of film in cameras. Took 2 rolls, and in the spring I had 24 pictures of their cottage in winter. They'd never seen it in winter. Oh, William, he said, we must reward William. I said, no. I said, I just did it for fun, thought it might be interesting for you. Well, Enza said, I know what I'll do. I will make dinner for Bill and Billy. I said, well, Angie, you don't need to do that. William, he said. She called me Bill. Mostly he called me William. William, he said, don't turn her down. You'd be making a mistake if you did that because she is a fine cook. I said, well, of course we'll come. We did, and we had dinner. And after dinner, when he traveled around the world. He was at my age, almost at my age. He was still a consultant all around the world. And he'd be gone, and he would say to me now, William, he'd say, uh, I, I've known a lot of people, 3 generations of scientists, and I sometimes am called in when young people, bright young people, very bright young people, are working on a problem. They cannot solve the problem. They call in someone called a consultant. On some occasions, I am honored to be that person.
Uh,
I come, we spend a few days, maybe a week together. Somehow we find a solution to the problem. And for that, he said, William, they pay me a great deal of money. Because I made me laugh. But anyway, we're having dinner, and everywhere he traveled, he'd get a little wine. I'm not a drinker. But
Yeah.
and so after our little dinner together, it was very nice. It was a venison stew.
Mm.
We were sitting there, and and Enza began to take some, and Miller took some of the dishes to the kitchen, and I said, "Well, Heinz," I said, you've told me you've been honored to work with three generations of young scientists." I said, "Heinz, tell me, who is your best friend?" He said, "Well, William, I my best friends are mostly in the cemetery," he said.
Mm.
Well, let me just go back a step. The summer before that, I'll make this quick. The summer before that, we'd been out in our little fishing boat, and we were taking a little neighbor girl. We were going to the marina to get gas. You could go to town to get gas, but I was going to the marina. She wanted to see the marina, and so on. It's in my book, the last book. Well, anyway, we're going along, and I see Enza. And there she is, and there's some man with her. And I know Heinz is in China. I know he's in China because he told me he's going. And I said to my wife, I said, "Millie," I said, "Heinz has gone in already and has got some old guy over there." And she said, "No, no, Bill, don't be like that." Well, see, I'm a psychologist. I'm supposed to be a little more wise than that, but I made an inappropriate statement. Well, anyway, well, she waves her apron, so I think, well, we better go over. But I think if we get out, we're going to sit for an hour and a half and a wonderful conversation. It's always wonderful with Enza, but I want to get to the marina and show the girl whatever she wanted to see and get gas.
Yeah.
So here's the old guy with his fishing pole, and bib overalls and a cap, and I just stood up in the boat. Shouldn't stand up in a boat. I stood up in our little 12-foot fishing boat, 7.5 horse engine, and she told me his name, but I didn't catch the name. "Nice to meet you, sir," I said, and I shook his hand, and I said, "We've got to get to the marina. It's Sunday. They close at 5. I don't want to, get there too late." So we zoomed away. Now it's winter's come and gone. We're having our dinner. We had the dinner. I'm asking Heinz about his best friends. And he said, "Well, most of my best friends are in the cemetery." But he said, "Bill, my best friend is," and he mentioned a world-class physicist. Our son seemed to know about who that was, and certainly others did, knew, world-class physicist. And I said, "Oh, I would love to have met him, Heinz." Well, he said, "I think you did." And Enzo said, "Well, yes, Bill, you did. You shook his hand on our deck last summer." I was humiliated. I mean, idiot of the month, I was thinking, oh my gosh, here's this world famous guy. He was visiting. Yeah, she said he was visiting while Heinz was gone. He was visiting at our cottage, and he died just last fall. Oh my. Well, I was embarrassed. Now I'm trying to recover a little bit. And so I say something like, "Oh, well, Heinz, tell me," I said, "who is your best living friend?" Trying to change the subject a little in my kind of adolescent way, I suppose. And he said, "Oh, Bill, that's easy. Werner von Braun." And I thought he's got to be joking.
Really?
You know who that is?
Yes.
Werner von Braun. Yeah, he got us to the moon. V1s,
Yeah.
V2s for Hitler, and the V2, of course, was what got us to the moon, a version of it. He came to America. He was, brought here as a guest. And anyway, and I picked up. I said, "Werner von Braun." Oh my! I said, "I know that name. I'd heard him speak at Madison, University of Wisconsin. I saw him walk down down the left side of Bascom Hill, down by the music school, with a big entourage. That's all. But I'd heard him speak, and he oh, pardon me. I took some dishes out to the kitchen, and I said, "Enza," I said, "is Heinz joking with me? Werner von Braun?" She said, "Oh no, we've known Werner and his wife for years." She said, "In fact, Heinz and Werner were in university together, and they were about 2 years apart, and they just knew of each other, but later they got to be friends. Von Braun went to Peenemünde, northern Germany, and developed V1s and V2s, and Heinz went into the Air Force, and they worked on other jets and so on and so forth." but and I was just stupefied. And I come back out and I said, Werner von Braun, oh my.
Oh.
And then one other little thing that night I remember, I looked up on the wall and here were branding irons, little ones about this
Hmm.
long, and then a whole set of branding irons on the wall as decoration.
Hmm.
And we were sitting and I was holding my wine, kind of pretending I was sipping it a little bit. And Heinz was having his glass of wine. And I said, those branding irons make a very interesting uh, display on your wall up there. It was a wall of a high part of a wall on a high curved ceiling. And she said, oh, yes. She said, those were gifts from dear friends of ours in Argentina. And
Hmm.
Billy kind of looked at me out of the corner of her eye, and I looked at her out of the corner in Argentina, where the Nazis, a lot of them went.
Hmm.
Well, we have many dear friends in Argentina, they told us. Well, I didn't touch that one. I just
Hmm.
thought that was fine.
Hmm.
But Heinz said that they came to this country, and if they cooperated with the Allies, particularly with America, they were not prosecuted.
Hmm.
And he spoke good English, Heinz, with an
Hmm.
accent. She did too.
Huh.
And in fact, they called us. When they, I always we spent a lot of time with him. He We sat on their deck one time, and we were facing south, and we had a cottage, and I said, Heinz and Enz, I said, if you ever sell this cottage, please call us before you put it on the market. I mean, I
Hmm.
just thought it would be nice to own that. Well, when they left, he called me, and I answered right there at the kitchen telephone. And he said, Bill, we're moving to to Australia for permanently. And he said, our cottage is going up for sale. You indicated an interest. He remembered that. Many years ago, he said, maybe in that cottage. And I said, well, at this point in our lives, we couldn't afford to buy another one, although we do own two now. And so they moved, and we kept in touch with Heinz and Enza. Heinz died first. Millie did we'd email back and forth, and then Enza finally died, and then it
Hmm.
all stopped. We have cards from them. Dear Bill and Millie, we're in uh,
Hmm. That's
Morocco. I
terrific.
remember one was from Morocco, and he
Uh,
bought spark plugs there, and he was surprised $10 piece for spark plug. And he made some jokes about that. But again, we're not talking about Dr. Dreikurs, who we're getting off the subject.
yeah, yeah, we are.
But
Sh-
ask
Shay's
me something
gonna
about Dr. Dreikurs, and I'll try to answer that.
well, Shay's gonna be closing us up here. We'd like to keep this at about 30 minutes, and
Sure.
so maybe do another episode later, but I'll let Shay close us up here. So
Uh, so should we ask our final question about
mhm.
book recommendations? Or should
Well,
I do
he's got
the exit?
I
Recommendations for
think
what?
Well, Dr. Camp, I think we usually ask for book recommendations, but you've got 10 books and we've got a list of your books. We're going to put those into the channel so people can get to your books. But I'm assuming that you would recommend your own books.
I would. But
Okay.
there's certainly ideas that were developed
Uh-huh.
by two uh, stellar individuals, and I simply summarized and tried to bring them into the
Mhm.
present, which is what Dr. Dreiker said. He said we need to, kind of bring things up to date and bring them into the present.
Mhm.
For example,
Mhm.
there's a chapter in there on technology, telephones and computers and
Mhm.
all of
Mhm.
that. That wasn't in Children the Challenge, one of Dr. Dreiker's book. He wrote that with
Right.
Vicky Stoltz, as you know. And
Yes.
he said we need to bring the ideas into the present and modernize them in some sense, that is the word he used, so that others will be interested and will make use of these wonderful ideas, concepts, and strategies that work so well with people.
Yeah. Good. Okay, Shay, do you have a final parting words for us?
We really appreciate your time, Dr. Camp. You've been so interesting and
Yes.
just so informative. We would love to do a part two eventually and hear more about Drikers and your own experience. We really appreciate you for coming on and talking with us today.
Well, you're very kind to take time
Thank
to
you.
do that. And thank Ben I think Ben helped to arrange it.
Yes, he
Ben's a
did.
good man. Ben's an interesting man. There's Ben. My last book, Ben prompted. I told him that. I took an evening at Wisconsin Psychological Association. It was maybe a 1 credit, 1 CEU course, and I met this fellow, Dr. Ben Rader was doing something, and he was talking to us about informal education of a psychologist. I'm using
Yeah.
terms, but that's pretty much what it meant, I think. And he gave a very interesting presentation about that, and then asked us to report a few little anecdotes from went around the room, and a few people said something, and I was one of them, I guess. And I thought, what a good idea.